Hello, everyone. This is a book haul for Historathon 2025. The first book that I got very recently is The Normans from the Brief History series. This one is written by a French guy, Francois Neveu, and it was published in 2006 and was translated almost immediately in 2008. It's less than, well, it's about 200 pages, and it's it's food for thought anyway. It has a nice, interesting start point. He opens out the whole life of the Normans through three particular events: one in 841, one in 1066, obviously, and another in 1130. And then begins. And yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that he might have read Elsie Rosedal's book called The Vikings, because they both start in a very similar kind of way, structurally at the beginning. So there's Scandinavian beginnings, and then over the page, some stuff, and then sources. Exactly how Rosedal has her book about the Vikings structured, and then talks about language, which is the same as well. And he says some very similar things, interestingly enough. Except he does one of those things that is very convenient if one is almost like the younger brother or the subsequent person, the second person following in the footsteps of whoever it is, whenever it is. So Rosedal was back in 1990. This is obviously, as I said, 2006, and he sums up one of the things right at the beginning. For me, anyway, I thought it was terrific. How do we understand the Scandinavians? How do we understand the Normans? Well, we all know that the word Norman comes from Northmen, and that is how they are referred to in Western sources. Christian authors also use names such as pagans or Danes, and everyone says that. Peter Sawyer in the Oxford History of the Vikings and so forth. They talk about that kind of thing. And then the very next sentence, the Danes were in fact the earliest of the Nordic peoples to become organized, and from the 8th century were the most easily identifiable neighbors of the kingdom of the Franks. I mean, there's some amazing stuff in the Oxford History of the Vikings about where the Vikings come from. I mean, why did they suddenly emerge pretty well out of the late 8th century or the 800s and exist from about 800 as Vikings? Terrific pages in that has a really tremendously lucid explanation of things, and Rosedal is pretty good as well. And this, in that one sentence, I mean, kind of almost perhaps a point is perhaps missed. The Vikings were organized. I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit of a student of history, or overly student-like in thinking how fantastic that is. I mean, we could have the contrary thought that, well, they surely they were organized in the 600s or the 700s, but maybe they weren't quite as organized as they were in the 790s when they're going on these raids. But there is that one, and I hope this will be obviously a terrific contrast, or not a contrast. compared to other things like Marjorie Chisholm. Yeah, being a French guy, you know, does he have a different angle? And anyway, he's a French guy, so how about it, kind of thing. So yeah, if I have, I need to find the time to read this. So yeah, there's that one. The other one I bought was also from the Brief History series, and this one's about the Roman Empire. This is by Stephen Kershaw, and he is a classics tutor for Oxford University. And there are a good number of pages in this, 420 or so, pretty much. And it's a fair old gallop and romp through the whole thing from 63 BC, seems to feature twice in the first chapter. And he's sailing through at a pace. So, for instance, a hat trick of good emperors is on 172, and we kick off with Nerva at 96 AD, and we're already at the end of Hadrian by 198. So yeah, and I read some of this, and I thought, I don't need another book on the Roman Empire, do I? I don't. I got one or two things. I've got some Scollards. I've got some Brunt. I've got some stuff. What do I need this for? Well, and the thing that is missing from my shelves anyway is literally a brief overview running through the whole thing from start to finish in short order, in a good short order. And because this guy is coming out of Oxford University, he's obviously amazingly good. And I think he is going to kind of provide a précis and a summary that hopefully is exact. So yeah, there's that one. And then we get to a series of 3 books that are slightly related, also from the Brief History series. But this one is obviously a brief history of America. This is by Jeremy Black. He's another English emeritus professor. He's from the history, professor emeritus of history, University of Exeter. So somebody that we might know who's knocking around somewhere around about down there, Devon way. And they're yeah, this. I mean, I don't need this, do I? No. I've got the very short, no, not the very short, the short Oxford history of the world for America, written by some guy, another guy from who's a professor from London University, I think, and it's very good. But this one is different in the fact that, well, again, it's the Brief History series, and he's going to try and pack in the whole thing in 280 pages. And this is first published in 2024. So, pretty up to date, and hopefully, therefore, and as he says, the whole sweep that's going to, I mean, do histories really change that much from, if we took it from the year 2000, America up to 2000, how things are in 2000, does that make any difference about what's interesting in the various generations preceding, as opposed to a start point of 2024, and therefore things might just seem a little bit different, and a little bit more. Other things might be more or less interesting. So we can only be as up to date as we are practically right now. But he says some terrific things at the beginning as such, and it might be worth just reading out just a little bit of it, give you an idea of just where this guy's coming from. Because, I mean, how about it? Variously described as history wars or culture wars, the contentions of the present engross American history. That of, for the purpose of this book, the area encompassed within the modern boundaries of the United States of America, from statues to statutes. Famously, fools rush in. And it is necessary for me to explain why I am trying to do so. First, there is no book that can be definitive, and all of us are contributing to a debate. That is the spirit of this book. I hope you will find it of interest, and it will be great if you disagree, as I will have engaged your consideration. Second, America exemplifies many of my interests in history, notably the role of geography and place, the contingencies of circumstances, and the problems with notions of a zeitgeist. The challenge of writing a history of America is increased if you have few allotted words, but even more so by established assumptions about what you should cover and with what emphasis. That represents both challenge and opportunity for a foreigner who may get it wrong, albeit with a fresh set of outside eyes, but who nevertheless offers that comparative perspective. Indeed, many American problems are, and always have been, larger world problems, whether we are considering natural or human elements. There is also the need for a chronological perspective. Americans in the early 2020s talked much about the nation having never been so badly divided. They tended to forget that America itself is a product of acute political divisions, and that the Democratic and Republican parties came out of a sectional rift in which Americans ended up killing each other in numbers unmatched since. America is a problematic term, at once geographic and political. Here it is intended to serve as a description of the land now part of the United States of America. But as such, its history, blah, blah, blah. And he says, moments of counterfactualism help explain the importance of how what actually happened really shaped the United States. Rejecting the standard narratives of Whig or Whiggish history highlights the complexity of the American experience, rather than presenting a simplistic story of how we got to the 13 colonies that became the United States. It's necessary to embrace a more complex history. And on he goes. Yeah. So, this kind of sort of, I'd like to get to this as soon as possible, really. There's been a couple of things that have been playing on my mind, shall we say, seriously and not so seriously, since George W. Bush, pretty much, when he came out with what, to me at the time, I thought was the most extraordinary thing. It's just this bizarre statement that America is the greatest country in the world. I mean, why does anyone really feel the need to actually say that, and to say that publicly? What do they hope? What do they expect the consequences are likely to be? And then subsequently, even Obama was saying that. And I don't know what the situation is for Americans. Precisely. I've talked to a few, and for me here in England, I've just been hearing presidents since George W. all of them saying how America is the greatest country on earth, and it was Obama who started saying how America is the greatest country there ever has been. No, wasn't it? He said it's the greatest country on earth, the greatest country there. America's the greatest country that. of all time or something, or the greatest country that there's ever been so far, sort of thing. Now, I'm not an expert on American history by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I'm woefully underread on the topic. But, and discounting the kind of the major obvious problems to wondrous high status, shall we say, and obviously there are some obviously good things about America but this whole idea of that America is so fantastic has a kind of a negative, not only a negative consequence with how people have been living through this, how they've allowed such public statements by presidents to affect their state of mind and their thinking. In two ways, really. I've encountered people who, for example, a guy didn't want to send an item, a collectible item, to me here in England that was Canadian, that happened to have a portrait of Queen Victoria on it, which is relevant, oddly enough. And he simply wasn't going to send me it because he thought that it would probably get stolen or destroyed once it arrived here in England. He wasn't worried about sending it in America. He wasn't worried about the idea that wherever he was in America, and I can't remember where he was, that it would probably make its way to some kind of airport, maybe New York way, and then over to England. No, he wasn't worried about that. He was worried about the fact that he simply refused to send an item through the post because he just assumed that somehow or other that England was a foreign country and it was likely to get stolen, and he couldn't possibly, the postage in America is fine. It must be therefore somehow substandard, even in a place like England or something. And I managed to persuade him to do so, to send it to me nonetheless, simply because it meant a certain amount to me, because the lady that appeared on the thing was Queen Victoria, and that's she used to be the Queen of England, which is where I am, or where I was at the time, and still am. And that managed to sort of kind of change his mind, funnily enough. But I couldn't change his mind by sort of saying how postage in England is sort of fairly standardly kind of safe and secure and reasonably likely to arrive, just like kind of other first world countries, Western countries, European, Western European even. Really, you can send things through the post in France and Germany and Spain and Italy, and they will arrive. We're not second-rate countries. And and as a sort of a kind of a corollary to that, it was at that point, the moment that George W. Bush started talking about how America is the greatest country on earth, that was the moment when Americans started saying something like, yeah, we're not going to send anything through the post unless it's by courier. Unless it's by courier. So therefore we want kind of like $50 or $100. Whereas previously from ordinary US thingy-bob, whatever it is, the United States mail, it would cost $15 to send it registered, maybe something like that. About the same. It's all about the same all around the world. But no, it had to be sent courier, and this is literally in the area of interest for me, it was almost everyone in America, all the American dealers, all the American people that had things for sale. Every single one of them would send. They either had no international postage or ask specifically, and we'll talk about it, or courier only, and maybe $75, $85, or whatever it was. And everyone else in the world just says, yeah, we'll be able to send it registered to America or to anywhere else in Europe or in the world, and it'll be about the equivalent of $15. That's the reality of it. It's just a tiny little micro example of, the lived experience of and seemingly cause and effect and consequences. So whilst that has not been devastating, it's not really it's the same old human world where things are the way they are. But if only for kind of academic interest. That is real. That's my personal experience, and it obviously other people's experience elsewhere. And I kind of so that's kind of one area of it, and the other area is what I've noticed reading books is that Americans, specifically Americans, pick out England to be insulting towards, rude towards, and generally put them down and slander them and libel and defamatory and slanderous content is something that I've encountered time and time again reading books, history books, and perhaps other related non-fiction. That's another factor. That just seems to be American culture. So it's something like kind of, a guy has a theory and he's trying to make a name for himself, and something to do with how America has done something pretty fantastic, and almost at the same time, miraculously, somehow or other, England has done something lousy, second rate, and bad in some way or other. And when I've kind of, like 20 years ago, I started looking into these things, these instances, and 15 years ago, I found them to be not the case. It was absolutely not the case. I had a massive, fantastic conversation with a guy from Northern Ireland, all about the Ulster Scots, who went from Scotland to Ulster and then to America. And there's a senator, a former senator from America, and the name's going to escape me. He did a 3-part TV series and an accompanying book. And the guy from Northern Ireland had bought the book, read it. I'd watched the 3-part TV film documentary. But I'd picked up a book from the British Library all about the Scottish in the British Empire. So there was plenty in there about the Ulster Scotch in America. So, this is absolute slander, left, right, and centre from this. I mean, at the time, I was like a kind of a naive, how shall I say, wide-eyed, or just someone who's respectful. I mean, wow, here's a distinguished person. This is a senator from the United States. This is not a minor guy. And I listened intently and carefully, and I'd already read the book that I mentioned, though, having said that. And at various points, I'm like, he can't say that. That's absolute nonsense. That's an absolute lie. At various points, he was talking about how the British had done this, and the British and the English had done that in the 1600s in Northern Ireland, something or other. No way. It's just slander, absolute slander. And I had this vast conversation with this Northern Irish guy over on Historum.com. I don't know, 15 years ago now. And yeah, I was patient, and I eventually kind of got through to him that hey, it's a bunch of the stuff that's about England are just lies and slander. And they it just seems like the formula is to use England as a scapegoat, to use England as this pariah country almost. The French kind of get a bit of a positive reading sometimes, and maybe the Germans kind of they get away with having sort of done nothing good or bad. But when it comes to England, oh yeah, let's put England down, and that'll make us seem a bit shinier on our little hill. And that's what I've been coming across. That's what I've been encountering. And from my upbringing and what I agree with in life, I think that's very wrong. Yeah, I think that's rather bad and very wrong. And I'm not devastated by it, and I'm not. I just feel a bit more worldly, and I just feel a bit more knowledgeable about the real world, really. Yeah. Yep. That's the way it is. So, I mean, it's tempting to have thought that, hey, maybe I can go on a little mission in life and have arguments with Americans and tell them that their country is not the greatest country in the world, and that England is the greatest country in the world. In fact, England is probably the greatest country there ever will be. Perhaps England, in fact, is the only country there ever will be that's good enough to be called a great country. We're only human, kind of thing. I'd say that just for amusement. I think I might have said that on a previous video, just to see what kind of reaction I might get. But that was really, it's kind of for half irreverent humour, half a bit of a wind up kind of thing, just to see the reaction, like provoking a reaction or something. Yeah. I mean, how can I sum it up? Both England and America are fine countries, as countries go, or rather as humanity is capable of. So like Americans often talk about their constitution. You guys out there, you talk about your constitution. I've got involved in various interesting discussions, and various people and various social media sites have mentioned the U.S. Constitution. And hey, the English Constitution involves ancient liberties, and the liberty didn't start with the arrival of the Statue of Liberty, or the Declaration of Independence, or anything subsequent to that. And that's what I've been discovering as well in history. So yeah. So I don't think that I don't think nations and peoples are a social construct, and but I also think that there is the good and the bad of humanity. I mean, the art of living is collective, as well as individual. And with a decent constitution and with solid, well-established institutions of society, whether that be, good manners, politeness, honesty, then that's going to do rather well for society and for people in society generally, and as well as having a good economy. I mean, I know I bought a little book about whether or not England should join the euro back in the day, and it said that Japan, the Japanese economy, was 1/3 as much, again, successful as compared to all other European countries, all your other European economies. The same as the United States. And the I double checked the information. I double checked at the World Bank and the OECD and CIA thingy bob book. And that bit was rubbish. The Japanese economy per capita is just the same as the other countries from Western Europe, but the American economy makes 1/3 as much money again compared to all the other countries on Earth, which took me back to a book I looked at again 15, 20 years ago about economic history. And that had England as wealth per capita as 1/3 as much, again, compared to all other countries on Earth, including the United States. That there was everyone else, and then there was England in 1900. And I've read nice books about how the 20th century is America's century, and the 19th century is England's century. And then I've encountered books, a nice coffee table hardback that was Britain, what was it called? Something about Britain in the 20th century, and it was something, maybe the subtitle was The British Century. The British Century. And on the back was this nice old lady sat on a chair holding a cup of tea. Quintessential, terrific. Yeah. So, all of which kind of rounds out one or two things that I've been saying on my previous videos, and this is the moment for I think seemingly naturally to bring it round, as it were, into order. I know I've been rambling on for over half an hour, and if you're still listening to me, I salute you. I'm not sure that I would. Although, but there we are. I hope I've said some real things and some meaningful things, and that all of which means that this funny old guy, Jeremy Black, who is very prolific, and you might be able to find him on YouTube as well. He might have been interviewed by somebody or other. Anyway, a little search for Jeremy Black. Yeah. Robert Gildeer says he's a master of his craft, but not that I pay any attention to what people say on that. They're all their colleagues or something. They want to get invited to a nice dinner or something, don't they? They're not. Anyway, I don't know. So there's that one. So it'd be lovely to be able to make some time to read that. Okay, and then the last two. I bought this William the Conqueror by David Bates from the Yale English Monarch series, and hopefully this is perhaps the kind of definitive job on the subject. It is over 500 pages, 520 something pages, and apparently a guy writing in the Financial Times. Why would I be listening to some guy talking from the Financial Times? I ought to have done 30 years ago, shouldn't I? But I'm not sure I would do so now. Anyway, he says it's the definitive biography of the man who forever changed England. And Paul Dalton, writing in the Times Literary Supplement, says no scholar working in the field can afford to ignore this one. So yeah, there it is. Lots of good stuff, hopefully. And the last book I bought this weekend, our bank holiday weekend, from a nice Polish lady with a little stall on the market, and I saw this, and William the Conqueror. I thought, wow, it's an old book about William the Conqueror. You know, Richmal Crompton is the author. This looks like it could provide some really interesting perspective, and it was sort of 50 pence. Hey, I'm buying this. Yeah, and I can see the likeness of the great man in the little boy, is what it says in the caption below. It is a book from the William series. Enter the Sweep, a birthday treat, the leopard hunter. William leads a better life, and so on and so forth. So I couldn't resist that. Cup of coffee, and ice cream, and an old book called William the Conqueror. So that is hopefully part of where I'm my general sentiment in that particular subject area, shall we say? So yeah, there's my little book haul, and I hope things are have been interesting, hopefully. So yeah, happy reading, and bye for now.